Thanks, Anushka. I mean, I think part of the reason why people are finding it sort of not as gripping as they might is because it's all quite confusing. So you're, Ian, a leading lobbyist. What is it that David Cameron did that, under the rules, you're, as I understand it, not allowed to do?
Yeah, so basically David Cameron engaged in what I would call secret lobbying. I'm not allowed to do that. I have to be on a register. Rather ironically, Robert, it was David Cameron's government in 2014 that passed a lobbying act that only captures 20% of the lobbying that's taking place.
So just to explain to me, so if you wanted to talk to the Chancellor about one of your clients, how would you go about doing that under the rules?
Yeah, so under the rules, we have to go through what's called the usual channels. You write a formal letter, you make a formal request, you declare on a public register who you are lobbying for and the people that are lobbying for you. David Cameron didn't do any of that.
Yeah, I mean, because as we all know, on not just with Rishi Sunak, but with a number of other ministers and officials, he simply picked up the phone or texted them and said, "Have I got a deal for you?" How much of that kind of lobbying by people who work directly for companies or institutions takes place, do you think?
So when the legislation was being put through in 2014, Transparency International estimated that about 80% of the lobbying that is taking place, not just by businesses, it could be by trade unions, charities, third sector groups, everyone can lobby, but was not going to be captured by that lobbying legislation. Now, I'm not going to argue with Transparency International. I mean, the vast majority of lobbying is not in the, shall we say, the public square, and it should be.
So, I mean, I heard the Cabinet Office Minister Chloe Smith today. She sort of implied, but I just wonder what you thought about this, that somehow lobbying for third parties by somebody like you is somehow worse than lobbying by David Cameron. Do you sort of understand what she's getting at there?
I have no idea what she's getting at. I mean, all I want is a level playing field.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to declare who they're lobbying for and who's doing the lobbying. You know, to say that there's something nefarious going on from people like me who have actually to declare what we're doing compared to those who do not is a complete joke. We need reform of this broken legislation.
And, I mean, there's another aspect of it which seems to me to be slightly odd. Is, as I understand it, you do have to declare, register, go through the usual channels if you're going to a minister or a senior civil servant. But if you go to a special advisor, the rules don't apply. Is that right?
So if I go to a special advisor, if I go to Ed or Dawn, I don't have to declare any of this
Why
stuff.
do you think that is? Again, it doesn't really seem to make any sense.
It's a total nonsense. David Cameron didn't break the rules, Robert, because the rules are broken.
I mean, Ed, I mean, everything that, you know, Ian says is right, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of mad that you know, we decide that the kind of thing that David Cameron did would be completely wrong if Ian did it, but somehow it's all right for David.
Well, I think Ian put his case very, very strongly. I would hire him in a nanosecond on the basis of that display. I think that...
But these rules are mad, aren't they?
I would just say there's an element of... Well, first of all, I think, you know, to a certain extent, David Cameron should get some credit for at least starting the process of registering lobbyists. And Ian is a
You're saying that with a straight face.
Ian is a professional lobbyist, and his clients want him to help, and I don't have any problem with this, by the way, help engage with government. There are grey areas. So if you're the chief executive of a company, are you a lobbyist? Because when you go and see a minister and you're a company that's regulated, and you might be saying to the minister, look, this regulation is killing me. It's costing a fortune and it's not achieving what you want to do. Please, can you change it? Is he a lobbyist? Is he lobbying? Should he be registered as a lobbyist? Those are difficult questions, but I don't resile from the thrust of Ian's point, which is there is a wider landscape of what can be construed as lobbying, and it is worthy of debate how that should be regulated.
I mean, Dawn, one of the things that people are a bit confused about, and I'm going to talk to Rachel Reeves about this later, is that you didn't vote even for these narrow restrictions a few years ago.
Because there were too many holes in it. It needed to be better legislation, and we've been proven right, haven't we? I mean, this is about privilege and access, and We know it's wrong. This is sleaze to the nth degree. The government knows it's wrong. Cameron knows he's done wrong. You know, the reason why I think a lot of public are not sort of picking up on it because it's not being spoken about as much as it should, because the company went bust. Robert, the company went bust. That is huge. I mean, we know we've got the, you know, Byline Times exposed all the scandal of the PPEs. I mean, this is where it leads to. This is public money going astray.
Jordan, I'm going to come back to many of these points in a minute, but there's one other thing I want to ask Ian. I mean, you've got lots of corporate clients. One of the things that some of us found actually profoundly shocking today is Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, most senior civil servant, wrote to all civil servants effectively today and said, if you are doing outside work for another business or another institution, would you please tell me? It seems to me extraordinary. We've got to a situation where the civil service doesn't have a register of who is doing sort of outside work. It's astonishing, isn't it?
This is a broader point. These are public servants. Why are public servants being paid by other organisations at the same time? This is a question, actually beyond lobbying, Robert, this is a question of ethics and good governance. To Ed's earlier point, though, about the chief executive that goes in, is he a full-time lobbyist? No, he's not a full-time lobbyist, but you clear up all of this by having a register of lobbying.
Yeah.
So you can see who's meeting who, when they're meeting them, and what they're talking about. I would sign up to that. That would get rid of this Groundhog Day problem. We're just going round and round in circles.
But all meetings with ministers are registered. I mean, that's how people know that ministers met with Greensill so regularly.
The reason we know about David Cameron doing this is for some great investigative journalism, Ed, not because of the lobbying.
But those meetings are registered.
He's right about that, Ed. And so, Ian, do come back soon. Great to have